Okay.
Okay. Call to order. I call this meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee to order November 28th, 2023 at 10 a.m. I will now read the script for remotely conducted open meetings. Good morning. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is convening by video conference pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. This meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you, and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Use the raise the hand feature in Zoom to indicate that you'd like to offer a comment. Chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order that they were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Leah Hill, and request that they be read into the meeting record. Her email is lhill@nantucket-ma.gov. Confirming member access. I am Peter Brace, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Doug Rose.
Here.
Gary Beller.
Here.
Matt Fee. Matt Fee. Okay. Tim Brain.
Here.
Jen Carberg.
Here.
Okay, acknowledging Matt. Rachel Freeman.
Here.
And Chair Peter Brace. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Leah Cabral.
Here. Leah Hill.
Okay. Christy Kickham, he's coming on right now, so I see that he's here. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Kirk Bosma.
Yep, here.
Thank you. Shelley Lockwood. You there, Shelley? Okay, we know she's here. Okay, so finally, each vote taken in the meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All right. So, public comment. We will take public comment right now. Please be aware that this public comment must not be on anything that's on the agenda. Is there anybody that has public comment? Amy Cohane, please go ahead. You've got, hold up, you've got 3 minutes, okay? And we don't vote on this. And at my discretion, we may not even discuss it. So say what you got to say.
Okay, trying to lower my hand. My name is Amy Ford Cohane, and my husband and I live and own 76 Union Street. And I really want to thank you for this opportunity to share with you our kind of on-the-ground experience over at Mariner Way. So we are direct abutters to the Mariner Way development. As you likely know, Mariner Way runs from Union Street to the Washington Street extension. Properties in this area are adjacent to really fragile wetlands, the harbor and the goose pond. We're in a flood zone. In fact, our neighborhood is identified in the CRP as being at imminent risk of coastal flooding by 2030, something we are really already experiencing. There's so much standing water all the time. And now, as they've excavated for the building of 2 Mariner Way. You can see sitting water all the time. We, abutting neighbors, have been working feverishly since April with a coalition of 10 abutting neighbors to oppose the pools that have been proposed at 2, 4, and 6 Mariner Way. As you know, the cumulative impacts of such intense development will have serious consequences for the at-risk wetlands area nearby, thus reducing any ability we might have to increase our resilience when it is so needed. I'm speaking to you because we believe this issue should be on your radar. We really need your help. More visibility for this aggressive new development plan on land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is the Concom's official term, could help the entire community understand the bigger picture of what's going on around Nantucket and the grave implications for the island. From our neighborhood's firsthand knowledge, we realize how critical it is for the town to move as expeditiously as possible to implement 2 of the top priority recommendations in the CRP, update the zoning bylaw and update the wetland ordinance and regulations. We respectfully request that you put this matter on an upcoming agenda so that we can have a full discussion about this very important matter. Thank you very much. I was trying to speak fast so that I'm respectful of my 3 minutes.
Okay, does anybody have any thoughts? We'll maybe talk just a little. I mean, do we think this is a good item to have on the next agenda? I didn't mean you, Shelley.
Oh.
Okay, I'm talking to the committee. It's not discussion among other public members, and we're not going to go on and on about it. Okay, Doug, go ahead.
I'm inclined to add this to a future agenda if the rest of the committee is in agreement. It seems to be pretty illustrative of a lot of the issues we're now talking about, and in the outbound communications efforts. And I think it could be worthy of some discussion as to whether it gets incorporated into that somehow. Thanks.
Okay, Matt, go ahead. You're on mute. You're muted, Matt. Can't hear you. Okay, Gary.
Yes, the only thing I'd like to say is that we've already expressed some support, although not the final word, for the new updated the new updated regulations that the Conservation Commission. So this kind of fits in with the fact that we have been positive about the recommendations, and of course we're waiting for the final draft before we give our final imprimatur. But it might be good to put it on another an agenda. We would be able to at least monitor where that process is close to finalization, which we have been supporting.
Okay.
I'll try again. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Matt. Let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I just restarted. I think it should be on an agenda. I think it's a topic that, along with the zoning, that we've kind of ducking a bit, or, I know Concom's talking about it and getting a lot of pushback on some of their suggestions, but I think people have to understand why this is important. So I think we should be discussing it and, making recommendations that these be addressed. But it's not our job to address it, but it's our job to make recommendations so the appropriate people do address it.
Okay, Rachel, you might have had your hand up. Did you still have something to say?
I just realized that I'm agreeing with everyone else, and so I took my hand down. But exactly
Okay.
what I feel the same way. Thank you.
Okay, and I wanted to say I agree with Matt. Amy, we can't just jump into the fray and solve your problem for you. We advise the select board and other regulatory boards within the town on coastal resilience matters. This is obviously a coastal resilience matter, but we ourselves can't stop the pools. We can send an advisory, what we think, to the Concom and CC the select board. But I'm just letting you know what the extent of our abilities are. And of course, we'll take any public comments from people with situations like yours. We want all of it to make the plan better and to make what we're doing going forward better. But we're not your we can't help you make it better. We'll try, but we'll have a discussion at the next meeting, I would think. And I'll allow you one more comment.
It's a giant thank you. We really appreciate any support that you all would provide in staying in your lane, of course. But I'm just really glad that you're aware of our on the ground experience.
All right. Thank you for bringing it to us. Okay. All right. Number 4, presentation and discussion from Kirk Bosma, Senior Coastal Engineer, Vice President of Innovation at the Woods Hole Group on dynamic adaptation pathways for coastal resilience projects. And you guys have hopefully all seen all that information in the packet. Go ahead, Kirk.
Kirk, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Thank you, Peter and Leah, both. Let me share my screen a second. Can you guys give me a thumbs up that you can see my, or give me some verbal knowledge that you can see my screen, because I can't see you anymore.
We can see it.
Great. All right. So just want to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to just be here today and share some information with you. I've talked with Leah in the past at various conferences. This is actually a presentation I gave about a month or 2 ago at a national coastal conference. And I think she saw that and thought it would be worthwhile to share. And it really is going to walk through an example of, how communities can really deal with really complex situations under these changing climate conditions and flooding risk, especially in coastal areas. We're going to walk through this tool that we found pretty useful from a community perspective called Dynamic Adaptive Policy Pathways. We'll just call it DAP from now on, just to make it a little bit easier. Woods Hole Group has been done, and myself personally, we've been fairly involved with a lot of things on Nantucket, specifically through Land Bank, through the town, the initial, vulnerability and resiliency study completed by Arcadis. We provided all the data to them to complete that work through the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model. So I'll talk a little bit about that today. But really what I want to do is highlight another community, Falmouth, that was in a tough situation with some of their infrastructure in areas, and how these DAPs really made it easier for them to kind of navigate what is a really complex and hard discussion to have. And we've applied these in a lot of different areas since then, across the Northeast and Florida, to basically help communities navigate some difficult decisions. So you guys all know where we are here in Massachusetts. The specific location I'm talking about is in Falmouth, Mass, and Surf Drive corridor, which is a barrier beach with some tidal ponds behind it, and is kind of the shining location for the town of Falmouth of their waterfront and their shoreline. Here's what that looks like. So it's a very low line barrier beach with Surf Drive that runs down the extent of it. There are some homes that exist along a good portion of the roadway. There's the Shining Sea Bikeway, which runs all the way from Falmouth down to the village of Woods Hole, that goes through that area. So there's a fair amount of important infrastructure. There's an electrical substation. The main sewer line that runs down to Woods Hole Oceanographic is right there. Probably not the best place to have a sewer line, which they're realizing now, but it is what it is. So a lot of tough decisions that need to be made. It really is a location that experiences a lot of high risk and vulnerability to flooding. And that is just even in present day. So you can see the pictures over on the left-hand side there indicating, the flooding that regularly occurs during even minor storm events. There's a lot of coastal erosion that happens during those conditions. And you can see that on the right-hand side, the probability of inundation. This is directly from the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model, which we developed for the state, which is also, again, used throughout the island of Nantucket to do the assessments. And what it does is provides not just if you're wet or not under given conditions, but what's kind of the probability of that flood risk under incoming storms. We could have another whole long discussion on the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model, but today we're just going to focus on, looking at those results and what they mean for trying to sort out how to handle risk and how to adapt appropriately to those conditions. So the town in Falmouth here was really, the town of the surf drive area was one of the most at-risk areas. You can see the probabilities of flooding there even today are, annual, once every year type, storm events, 1 year return period storm events cause pretty significant flood risk along this barrier beach. Town was also really concerned about the natural habitat and resiliency there of the salt ponds. There's a lot of tidal marsh behind that area. And so they wanted to focus not only on the infrastructure, but the natural resources. And then they did receive state funding to look at this a little bit further. So the framework and process really for developing ADAP and the goals of this program were to maintain and promote, clean and welcoming coastal resources for the town, right? So again, this is their primary recreational area with beach access. The bikeway is there. They wanted to focus on those natural resources again, and then just balance the use of the roadway with the access and enjoyment of coastal resources. The whole program was very science and data driven. Nantucket's no different. The work we've been doing for Land Bank on Washington Street with the town involved, the work on Consu Spring, in other areas really have focused on data-driven, science-based approaches. So that physics-based flood risk modeling of the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model is used. And really that helped create buy-in from the town and community, knowing that we're really focused on providing accurate information to identify those town-wide vulnerabilities. And then the process was very community-led. So heavily engaged with town staff, committee members, residents. There were a lot of outreach meetings. We did very intense department-specific interviews to understand what the assets were and the usages and needs there. Again, 3 really engaging public meetings and workshops throughout the process, and then surveys that were conducted in the area as well. How we really were attacking this, and we knew the town knew that was vulnerable. The residents knew it was vulnerable. There was concern, but it was complex, right? There's homeowners that live down there. The town had to maintain the road, natural resources. And so there, all of the types of solutions that were out there, the question always rose, well, what do we really do? Right. And many communities are faced with the understanding of like, wow, it looks overwhelming, right? When you think about climate change, you think about flood risk, you think about the impact. How do you and where do you start? How do you prioritize what to do? And this tool, fed by public input, really helped the community navigate the process here, because not everything needs to happen right now. And there's clear uncertainty in the flood risk projections in what sea level rise and climate change is really going to do. Scientists do the best to estimate that, but nobody really knows exactly. So what this does, this pathway approach really buys time and removes pressure. Where, obviously there's identified from the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model clear and present danger areas, but there's also areas that, 2030, 2050, 2070 out in the future become more and more risky. But when that becomes risky and how it becomes risky really is important. So the process buys that time. It reduces uncertainty. So you're not using events and not time for decisions. And I'll get a little bit more into that later. It really provides flexibility to the decision process. So you're not, and this is a key point, you're not getting boxed in, right? A lot of times decisions will be made well, we're going to build this big barrier, this big thing, and that can box you into a certain solution that you're now tied to. So this really tries to keep you in an adaptive area that allows you to be flexible in your design approach and your management of the process. And it keeps those options open as you learn more, as we learn more about what sea level rise is actually going to do, of what storms are and how they're going to intensity and frequency are changing. And we kind of learn for journey, and it really can handle this complex decision making. So you're trying to stay in these upper figures in this adaptive space as you move forward, and then realize if you have this kind of flexible approach, and this bottom figure does a good job of presenting this, you might make decisions as you go over decades that kind of keep you below this acceptable risk threshold, which is this kind of hazy blue line here. If you just make a decision today about some inflexible adaptation, you're stuck kind of on this orange curve going up. And there's a point in time where you're going to, you can't adapt, you can't be flexible. And now you're stuck past that acceptable risk. And you're always going to eventually maybe go beyond that acceptable risk. But the idea is, with this flexible adaptation, you can change your ideas, you can change your past, and keep your options open going forward. So just to dig in a little bit about how this was applied to Surf Drive, this will give you some sense of how these can be used. First thing we did was really identify the problem. This was done through a vulnerability assessment, very similar to what the island of Nantucket has, looking at Massachusetts coast flood risk model results and looking at daily high tide flooding. So where was the risk present day? And then how is that risk under projected sea level rise conditions expected to change? And where would you have sunny day flooding into the future? I know through the Washington Street corridor, like an Easy Street area, during spring high tides or king tides in cases, you experience kind of those sunny day flooding conditions. So that was one factor that was evaluated here at Surf Drive as well. Of course, storm surge inundation. I showed this figure earlier, and that storm surge inundation was looked at not only under present day conditions, but how that risk was then changing over time, which is pretty severe in this low-lying area of Surf Drive, where, present day you have 1 year annual type storm risk. And then certainly going forward under projected sea level rise conditions, that really gets highlighted even more, where just small storms really can cause a problem in this area. And then the last factor we brought into play here was coastal erosion. So really identifying what are the driving factors for the problem at this particular location. And then that helped us to really start to think about what types of solutions would make sense. Second step was identifying the key assets through the corridor. So I mentioned this was a pretty complex area that had a lot going on. There was the recreational, sites like the beaches, bathhouse, the bikeway. There's actually low-lying neighborhoods behind the barrier beach. There was houses right on the barrier beach, electrical substations that went out to Martha's Vineyard. So major electrical lines under the Vineyard Sound were basically coming ashore at this location, with substations that were right in this location. You had, the sewer main, which ran, as I mentioned, all the way down to Woods Hole. That is the primary main sewer main for the village of Woods Hole. So that's a real problem for them to think about. And that runs pretty much right along this Shining Sea bikeway that goes through this area. So a lot of assets going on, which means, okay, what's the best solution here when you start considering all these assets, right? You're not just going to raise the road and expect it to work for everything. So there was a lot of variety that had to be considered here. The next step was development of potential actions. And the way we approached this was really looking at these themes regionally, based on feedback from community goals. So we ended up coming up with 3 major themes. Not that the community was tied to any specific theme per se, but they were centered around, natural resources was one. So we're really protecting and focused on natural resources taking the priority. Another one was protection, meaning we really just want to protect everything as much as possible. So what are the solutions that would fit within that theme? The third one was connections, which was a little bit different from protection, because the idea was we just want to make sure we can maintain connections. bikeway, the road. We need this as a transportation corridor, and the focus was really on the connections through the communities. And then the last one was this managed retreat approach, knowing that, if sea level rise was going as the state kind of had thought or indicated, there was going to be a point in time where retreat or abandonment of certain areas might make sense. And then we were able to, for each key asset, whether it was the road or the substations or the bikeway or the beaches, identify potential actions at each location. So for example, in that chart here for Surf Drive, we looked at, should we protect it through beach and dune nourishment as a first step, right? And that's a very natural resources based approach, but that functioned about through 2030. If you go down a little bit, you look at, well, let's talk about elevating the road and adding a revetment or a sheet pile wall. That fits right in the protection time frame, right? And really part of the goal was to maintain usage as long as possible and as long as feasible here, but still making sure that the natural resources and the recreational aspects that were so important to the town were really a part of the whole design process. So here's just an example of what that looks like for natural resources, those potential actions. You can see it was very targeted beach and dune nourishment. There was potential property acquisition in here, studies to relocate the sewer main. And this was all phased through time. So this is the short-term 2030 type elements. And then we went to 2050 and had all these different options available for thinking about elevating the bikeway, modifying salt pond connections, talking about flood protection berms near Town Hall, which was at the upper part of the system, relocation of the sewer main at this point in time in 2050. Again, all focused on the natural resources. Now, this particular plan wasn't, you didn't have to pick this plan per se, but it laid out for all the assets, comprehensive adaptation elements that really focused on natural resources. And you see by 2070, it was really about connecting the marshes and the estuaries and looking at this as kind of a different natural resources area while still protecting through nature-based approaches, the low-lying neighborhoods and so on and so forth. But the idea, again, is that these were the assets focused on natural resources. And we did these for each of those major themes. And some of the other themes looked at, more, like I said, elevating the bikeway, or in a protection case, we were elevating Surf Drive and trying to really protect it for a certain point. So all these different options were developed that fit under these various classifications and approaches to all the assets in the area. The fourth step was then really, okay, from all those things we developed, which are really, feasible, both from a actual functional performance perspective, but then also from a cost and community perspective. So, when you start thinking about constructing a really tall barrier at the seaward edge of the roadway, you're talking about $31 to $50 million. You're losing access to the beach, aesthetics. It does protect the existing infrastructure to a certain point, but there's pluses and minuses and benefits and costs associated with all that. So every single action we went through, we developed kind of this estimated cost and these targeted effects and adverse impacts. That led to the development of these DAPs, which I think are really helpful and really help the community understand what their options were and how that the best way to potentially proceed was. And so this is just the key to that 1 second on. It basically, think about it as roadways. And I like to think of the little circles, they're called transfer stations, but let's just think of them as rotaries. So people are very familiar with driving down a road. You hit a rotary, and then you can go around the rotary, and you can go around it as many times as you want, but then you can get off in different paths in different directions, right? The black solid lines are these tipping points are terminals. So when the road comes up to that black line, that's like a dead end. That means that approach or that adaptation really isn't going to work for what the goals are anymore. It may work for a certain amount of time, but if you ended up at a dead end, that's kind of like a case where you've hit the roadblock and you now created a non-flexible approach. So you want to make sure you want to get off that road potentially before you hit that tipping point. The colors there just indicate the different themes, as you go forward. And if it's a solid line, it's working as intended. If it's a dashed line, it basically means some function of that solution changed in terms of how it works. And typically what that means is it works for normal sunny day flooding and storms, but when you get to a dashed line, it might only work for sunny day flooding and not storms anymore. And then the red line you'll see is the preferred path. So this, which is overwhelming at first, is what a DAP is. And this is what it looks like. And this is for the actual surf drive road in this case. So that particular asset. So a lot to consume here, but let me try to walk you through how this kind of works. So the first thing you should know is all the different adaptations that we've kind of developed that I showed you about earlier for the road specifically are listed over here on the side, right? So it's everything from, and anything goes, right? So it's from bridge construction down to ending the road maintenance, to raising the roadway, to removing the road, using protective approaches to the road, seawalls, everything that could potentially make surf drive function or maybe not function in the future are listed on that side. Along the bottom, you can see the timeline essentially. So the timeline for this particular case, the driver was the sea level rise. So if sea level rise went up 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, here's the timing of when that occurs. Now you can see we also put on these various RCP. If you're not familiar with that, those are regional concentration pathways. That's basically emission scenarios that indicate when this various sea level rise conditions would be expected. So RCP 8.5 is a very high emission scenario, basically if the status quo continues. And you can see, you have a specific amount of increase, say by 2050, 2.5 feet or so of sea level rise. RCP 4.5 is a little bit more moderate type sea level rise condition. So you'd have to get out to like 2060 to 2065 before you see that 2 feet of sea level rise. Now, none of these may be correct. The key is that this might say this is actually 2150, right? That the idea here is it gives you, based on the sea level rise that you can monitor, when you might have to take specific turns in your direction or your approach. So all of these are laid out. If it's a grayed out area, that means we don't recommend you go down that path. You could initially, because it's just a waste of money early in the process. So, like, you don't need to build a bridge right away. The road is functional. It works now. It might have a little bit of flooding during storm conditions, but it's not flooded every day. And so you don't need to make that choice until you get out to this location. So if you were a person or a community member that was all for keeping the connections open, you would say, well, we're going to do improved maintenance through about, 2 foot of sea level rise. Then we're at a terminal point. We have to change our direction and we're going to go this way and go down a bridge construction route. You could also go down improved maintenance, but say, well, things have changed. Maybe the houses were gone. Things are different. We're going to now go down to this direction and we're going to end road maintenance, or we're going to go to raising the roadway, because all these directions and pathways are still open until you hit these terminal points. The red dashed line is what the town, through the community engagement, ultimately decided to think about and push forward. So it started with public outreach, which is ongoing about the situation, about the problem. You can definitely maintain current actions, which is right here, through a certain point in time, but about at 2030 to 2040, that's no longer going to be feasible. Why? Because every high tide is basically going to be flooding over your road. So 2 times a day, you're not going to be able to use it. So you have to make some kind of action. So for them, they chose, well, for the near term, we're going to do beach and dune restoration to keep the daily tides out. That doesn't mean storms couldn't necessarily flood it, but that's okay. And then you can see that only works so long because the sea level gets so high that, you really don't even have a beach and dune setting anymore. They've been going through the public outreach policy. And by that point in time, which could be as early as 2050, but might be later than that, they made the decision we would be informed enough to end the road maintenance and eventually go down a road where we're removing road sections and going forward. And so this choice, which is a little bit of a, kind of an approach of keeping actions and usage as same as current as long as possible, but then realizing that we might have to think about a new approach to surf drives specifically, is what they followed. Now, at any point in time, if they change their minds and things happen and things change, they could certainly go at this point here and take this rotary and go down any other different direction they wanted to go. And so those options stay open and going forward. The other thing we do is this pathway scorecard that goes along with that DAP. That basically says if you follow a certain pathway, what are the relative costs? What are the target effects and effects? And you can see here, if you just stayed on the blue line all the way, which is basically today, we're just going to let it go. The cost on that is pretty low, but there's some significant side effects associated with that, right? If you went full protection or connection, that's a very high cost. And then you can go down any of these pathways and develop what are the costs over time. So again, that preferred pathway starts down kind of this public outreach and beach and dune restoration, and eventually goes to more of an end or end the road maintenance and kind of remove the road and turn it into a natural coastal area approach. And that has a certain cost in associated with it. But you can make any of these pathways kind of, we looked at a purple and green. So we're going to try to do improved maintenance, and then we're going to switch down to this path. And what does that cost? And so you can start to lay out going forward what you might want to consider. And the real power here is you're not tied. Your hands don't get tied. You can keep things open, and options are available to, if community opinions change, development changes, sea level rise rates are higher, shorter, or quicker or slower, you can adjust very easily, and you always have this plan that's very flexible to do that. Just one more quick example. This is the surf drive bathhouse and parking area. So this was more of a recreational theme approach here. And so again, we have one of these DAPs for every major asset in the corridor. So in this particular case, it was really looking at, that connection theme where we want people to be able to get here. We want people to be able to use the beach as long as possible. And so there was going to be this transition to portable facilities. So the bathhouse might not be there, but we can get portable facilities at the beach. When a storm comes through, we can get them out of the way, whether that's tractor trailer trucks, buses, those type of things. And then we're going to continue to maintain that beach. We really want to have that beach there. It might not be available for storm conditions, but for daily access for this particular beach area, which is the Surf Drive beach, they really wanted to maintain that. And again, if you ever hit an area where it said, well, it just doesn't make sense anymore, you could go to a different pathway through time. So what did we really learn through this process? This was one of our first applications of DAPS. We've, again, applied it since then to the actual village of Woods Hole, to a couple places in New Hampshire, and then also in Palm Beach, Florida. It really allowed, in this case, the town to navigate a difficult decision process and build consensus, right? So there's people with homes on Surf Drive that don't necessarily want to give that up. They understand the science, they experience the flooding, but it's a difficult process. So understanding that they don't have to make a decision right now, that monitoring is an important part, was a key part of the whole DAP. We developed an initial action plan based on today's goals and climate projections for the communities. You're able to define these key triggers and tipping points where you can adjust, the timeline, what your plan is for the future. So you're not locked in again to that specific point. You can switch those paths for a different action in the future. You're not even tied to the plan that's laid out. So you have that, key thing, which is flexibility, which, as an engineer, sometimes, and a lot of my colleagues, it's hard to get away from the fact, like, well, you designed this one water level. Well, the water levels are no longer fixed necessarily. So there has to be flexibility in your design. If there's anything I want you guys to take away from this, is in all the coastal resilience advisory work you guys do, designs, schemes, they have to be flexible. It can't just be a static process anymore. So what it ended up with for Falmouth was a very innovative managed retreat and restoration of natural resources goal, but also targeted key protection infrastructures. I didn't get into all the DAPs, but the substations, the sewer line, really, there was big focus on protection of those particular items as well. You didn't have to tie yourself into just managed retreat or natural resources everywhere. There was protection of certain areas as well. One trick with it is scalability can be difficult when you talk about big areas with lots of assets. It gets a little bit overwhelming. But if you have a nice confined area that you're focused on where you're having trouble making decisions on what the best solution is or how to proceed going forward, because there's so many options, this can work really nice. If you want to dig into this a little bit more, there's a lot of good information that was put together for the resiliency for the surf drive area right on the Town of Falmouth websites. There's a big adaptation plan. There's nice story maps that really walk you through, very kind of picture book oriented and science, tables and figures that walk you through the process of how the DAPs and the process was done for the surf drive area. And that was done with a lot of involvement with the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee of the Town of Falmouth, very similar to the setup you have here. So good resources online if you want to learn a little bit more about DAPs. So that's what I have. Thanks for the time. Hopefully this was useful for you to learn a little bit more about. And it's a tool that can be applied to think about how to build resilience in key areas throughout your community.
Peter, you're muted.
And I didn't even do it. Thanks, Kirk. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. Does anybody on the committee have any comments or questions? Gary Beller. You're muted, Barry.
I'll get off mute. Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. It was very interesting. The only question I have about it is that certain things, when you look at those charts and the timeline, the only concern I might have is that people will see the timeline and say, oh, that's not going to happen till 30 or 40, 2030 or 40, and therefore I don't really have to do anything about it now. So I'm thinking about the pump station problem, which you showed on the maps. And to me, that's a very serious problem. It's very clear what needs to be done. And in my own personal view, if I was at the Town of Falmouth, I'd say, okay, that we have to get done now. We have to start getting now. The longer we put that off, the more expensive it's going to be, and maybe the harder it's going to be to get it done. So the question I have is there any concern that by showing these timelines, you won't get people to be as active with coming up with the solutions or starting to do stuff than you would have normally? My question.
Yeah, good question, Gary. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't show you every single DAP. So if I showed you the one for the pump stations and the substations, they have a little bit more sooner to react type timeline than, say, Surf Drive, for example, or the Bikeway, where maybe you have a little bit more time to think or understand what's happening. Those have more kind of clear and present danger, immediate reaction. So depending on each asset, those DAPs kind of change when you have to take actions. And it was clear that those had to happen a little bit more quickly. Same with the sewer line. They went into that. There's actually projects that have already been conducted to start protecting the sewer line. So yeah, the thing that's really helpful though is that there's that timeline is flexible along the bottom. We haven't seen any, lack of action for the things that have been highly prioritized. What really happens is it focuses where the funding should go for those more immediate actions, right? So what we've seen is a lot of times when you look at these flood maps, this information, it shows so much at risk, right? People don't know where to start, right? Like, well, I got to deal with this and I got to do with that. I got to do with that. This really has helped them focus like, well, this is your first priority, right? Like the substation or pump station, that's where you need to go. Meanwhile, let's wait and see what happens with sea level rise for maybe the road itself. You don't have to do that right now. And of course, every community, every area, every site is a little bit different, but that prioritization, which I didn't kind of pull out without showing you all the DAPs, is built in there that I think helped them actually engage the ones that had to happen sooner and sort it out, which can be a very overwhelming, like, I don't have money to do all this, right? Well, where does the money need to go first? I think that kind of helped them in that respect.
Thanks, Kirk. Matt P.
Yeah, I think it's great. I love the explanation and the flexibility. I also like that you're not saying this will be done on this date. We've talked about it on some of our projects here as having triggers and identifying what the triggers are and when we have to move. And it's very interesting because we'll have two sides of the debate. One side, will be saying, hey, that can only be 3 years. After 3 years, it's over. The other side saying, no, this is going to last 50 years, and so I like that if you have a trigger and you can get both sides to agree that, okay, when these other things happen, we're going to change it. But that's very hard. I like how you present it because it's very hard to verbally explain that to people, to either side of a situation or many different sides. And I think it was well presented. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with some of the stuff we ran into, because there are people that, everybody has a different opinion on some of these, climate change elements, but laying it out so that you can establish a very clear trigger, like, well, okay, fine. We can all agree that if it gets to this level, this is going to be a problem. And so sometime in that time frame, there needs to be action taken. And that doesn't, mean you can't be planning that whole time for it, right? You can have the discussions, like exactly what you guys are doing, right? And why you're so valuable is you're making sure you're having the discussion and keep it active. Even if you don't take actions, or you can wait to take actions or establish that trigger point, at least you have the knowledge and information you need to make that decision when that trigger happens.
Great. Thanks, Kirk. Christy.
Yeah, thank you, Kirk. Sorry, guys, I had to bump off for a little bit there, so I might ask something that was already mentioned. But has the like the sewer line, for example, obviously that is high risk area. It doesn't seem like it picks up too much along that run. Like, would the community or the town of Falmouth preemptively soon just start to work on that running around so it's not running through the wet areas? I wonder if that ever came up as something to do sooner than later. And then also the other question is if there's ever been any option to prepare the community and say, well, we're going to keep this area for recreation, but it's time to not put the money into revetments and stuff like that, and actually just say the road is going to be rerouted. I'm sure there's existing roads that run around the wetlands areas, and if that's ever come up.
Yeah. So the sewer line, they've already taken some actions on that. So they have done some coastal protection measures in the short term to make sure the sewer line isn't damaged. Now, of course, the sewer line can get wet. It can get underwater. All those things are fine. It just can't get, cracked open, right, due to damage. So short term, they're just trying to make sure it's protected, but they have started the discussions of rerouting it around the whole system. There is an existing sewer line that does go around. It's not the main line. And so there's, obviously if you work in stormwater and sewer stuff, there's some adjustments that would need to be made there, but they have started that discussion. They're well aware that it's a silly place for a sewer line, right? So they need to get that fixed. So that discussion has been happening. And in terms of your second point, yeah, I think the solution that the town is really trying to promote is that long-term abandonment, transition to natural resources of this area. You know, the road is one piece. I think they want to keep the bikeway as long as possible. It's kind of their shining jewel of that area. But those homeowners there, I think they're really working with us hard to understand there's a, you know, we're going to maintain it for a certain amount of time, but there's, again, that trigger point like Matt brought up where we're going to have to probably think about a different approach here. I don't think they're very interested in investing for significant protection for that area. Per se. I mean, it's not, you know, downtown. It's not, you know, a major hub. It's got a lot of recreational value, a lot of aesthetic value to the town. But as you saw in that preferred pathway, a majority of the community is on board with, you know, slowly thinking about abandoning that road.
Thanks, Kirk. Leah?
Thanks, Peter. Kirk, for a lot of those side effects, there was loss of homes. Were those homeowners part of the whole discussion and decision of, you know, eventually abandoning the road?
Yes. Yeah. And it wasn't an easy process or an easy discussion to go through. So there was two major, you know, there was the neighborhood that was kind of behind the barrier beach off to the east side there. That was, you know, always looked at kind of an area that we're going to try to protect a little bit more as much as possible through various measures. But the homes on the barrier beach, which amounted to somewhere around, you know, 10 to 12 levels. And those are, most of those are like summer homes. They're elevated on piers. I think generally people understand what they're up against at that location to start with. But it was still a tough discussion to have, you know, the fact that the town would abandon services to them and those type of things. I think that's still an ongoing process. I can't say for 100% sure that everybody is in that row of houses is on board with the overall plan, but that's what the educational process and outreach process is intended to kind of work through. I will say that they were all engaged. Some of them understand what they're facing and are very realistic of like, hey, we're going to maintain this as long as we can. We understand what we're facing. And there will be a point where it probably isn't feasible anymore because you would just have a house over water at that point that you can't get to on a daily basis. So.
Thanks, Kirk. We should get going. Does anyone else have any other comments or questions? Okay, are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this item? All right, thank you, everyone. Number 5, discussion on developing an informational sheet regarding coastal risks and coastal resilient issues on Nantucket to hand out to real estate agents. You're up, Shelley Lockwood.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so several meetings, maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago when I was listening in, you guys were going over your social media outreach and trying to help people understand what you're doing and just how much information you have. And that's brilliant because most people, I don't do social media, but most people do. But it occurred to me during that meeting that real estate agents, of which I am one, talk to homeowners probably more than any other group around, right? We talk to homeowners every single day. So it just seemed to me to make sense to help you guys get your word out, get your description of what you're doing, your priorities, whatever, through real estate agents, since we are a conduit for you to property owners. So that led to me meeting with the woman, Isabel. She's our instructor on Nantucket for continuing ed for real estate agents. Real estate agents are required to take 12 credits a year, which is 4 classes a year to keep their license. It's not an option. Which classes real estate agents take is an option. They don't have to take, you know, except for an ethics one, I think is all required. But other than that, we can pick and choose which classes we want. So that's the lead up to me feeling as though adding what you're doing to a continuing ed real estate class is going to help you get your word out, get your priorities out, and lower my frustration level that I don't think that consumers are being educated. I think that there are homes being sold on Nantucket. I can't say for certain, but I can't imagine people would be paying the prices they're paying for some of these properties if they understood fully the risk. So that gets to the handout that I sent, or not handout, notes that I sent Leah earlier this week. She asked me to explain what fiduciary duties of real estate agents are. And there are several, and I won't go into a lot of them because they don't apply to this. There are, I think, 8 or 9 fiduciary duties we have to keep our licenses. The 2 that I think apply in this case with your work, with rising sea tide, with all of that. One is the duty of disclosure. And Leah, did you hand this out or did you send it? You did. Oh, good. Okay, that helps then. So you guys can all read what I can read, right? The duty of disclosure, we have to disclose any known material facts, and material facts being what could reasonably affect the value or desirability of the property. Personally, I don't believe that's being done in the perhaps manner or extension or application, whatever, that it should be. I think that potentially information is being withheld from the consumer. And that not only hurts our island, it hurts my profession as a whole, right? And that doesn't help any of us. So the second fiduciary duty that I put in this handout is loyalty. And that is a little different than what you might think. Our loyalty in that fiduciary duty is to our broker. And one would think it's to the consumer, but it's not. That particular fiduciary duty is to our broker. And what that means is that we won't put our broker in a situation where they're going to get sued or in trouble, right? We owe that to our brokers to state agents. That's a duty we have. So in my mind, in Nantucket's way of handling problems, I see lawsuits coming down the road from people who bought a house and are ripped, that they weren't told that by 2030 they're going to have twice a day flooding or whatever the other issues are that might affect their property. So bottom line of all that, if a real estate agent knows something, if we are aware, which is, I'll give you an example. A lot of real estate agents won't go to an inspection on a house because they don't want to know. They don't want to know, because if they know there's a problem, they have to tell the next person that looks at the house. It's not an excellent way to go through life, but it is what happens. So once real estate agents know these facts, know what you guys know what's happening, know which streets are going under, they have to say that. It's not an option. They're required to disclose that information. So my hope is we already have an environmental issues class. There's a structure for it. It's been approved. It's taught every year. My hope is to add a section to that class specific to Nantucket, because that class is statewide. And it goes into if your septic leaks, or if there's all kinds of environmental issues, lead paint, asbestos, whatever. My hope is to create a section to the environmental issues class specific to Nantucket and rising sea level, and add it in. So I met with Isabel. She's our teacher here. Their company is on the Cape. She's working with Leah, and I met with her via Zoom. She's completely on board to help me craft that addition to the environmental issues class. I would like to present your priorities because I think you guys have your finger on the pulse of what's most imperative and which streets are most at risk. Obviously, the information is in the Arcadis report. Isabel and I could go through it and glean on our own what we felt was most important. But and we can still do that if this is something you don't want to jump in on. But it feels to me as though you guys can probably already think of 10 things you'd love to say, right? Or get out there. So I'm asking if you're interested for your input on what you would like to see added to the class. So Isabel's approach about this class, with my wanting to kind of tweak it to be more Nantucket specific, is that it's about, you have to do 2 hours. That's a requirement for every class. She would spend the first hour kind of not quickly, but efficiently going over a lot of other environmental issues, and then spend the whole second hour just on Nantucket and the issues that you're dealing with. So she's very desirous of creating a platform for these specific issues. Once we get that included in the curriculum, it's completely possible for someone from your organization to go to the continuing ed class and be there for that second hour. You know, Leah would be there as the instructor, but we often have representatives from various professions at our continuing ed, like say the presentation is on mortgages. Well, there's always someone there from a bank, you know, and so it's not like this would be breaking new ground. Again, people don't have to take the class. However, if the information is encapsulated and put out there and an agent doesn't pursue it or doesn't learn, that's on them. It really will put brokers at risk in what I think is a good way, because I would like them to be at risk so that they freaking talk about this stuff. So once it's in a class, whether people take it or not, the onus would have been on the agent because the information was readily available. So that's my goal. I hope that made sense. I hate to use the term nutshell because my name is Shelley, but in a nutshell, that's kind of the idea. So again, I can go through the Arcadis report with Isabel. We can glean what we want and we can create this kind of bullet list or this presentation. Happy to do that. I think it's that important. I think you guys are much more educated and able to tell me and Isabel what you feel should be in the class. And I don't know when the class will be ready. I would love to have it ready by spring, if Isabel and I can come up with a curriculum and get it approved by then, but that's minor. The priority today with you guys is, would you like me to keep working with Leah, with you, and include you in the process? I hope so, but no pressure. Okay.
Okay, Shelley, thank you so much. Before I go to Leah and Matt, and before I lose the thought, since the information that goes before the realtors on the hazards of a property would then have to be, once they have the information on a property or a neighborhood, and then the realtors, of course, have to disclose that to the potential buyers. Seems to me that if they have the option not to attend the class, then they have the option of not knowing the stuff. And if they don't go to the inspections because they don't want to know how bad something might be, because they don't want to lose the sale, maybe it seems like to me it would be up to us to go the extra mile and put the information in their hands, whether they like it or not, and say, these neighborhoods right here, this area is in danger, and your office, your members, your brokers need to know this. And we realize you're going to take a class, or some of you may take a class, but we want to make sure that everybody gets this information. So for instance, the front line on Holbert Ave, okay? People who are living in the Smiths Point neighborhood, and I'm talking about on the other side of Millie's Bridge. People who are living in Codfish Park, instead of waiting for people who might feel like taking a class or might go to an inspection, putting the information in their hands right away so that they have it, so that they can't deny it. It goes to the office, it goes to their lead broker, their owner, whatever, but everyone gets a copy somehow. That to me would be better than waiting for them to, I'm sorry, but grow a conscience and do something about it.
I agree with you in theory, except the information is already out there in the Arcadis report. So that step's already been taken. The Arcadis report's been distributed to every real estate agency on the island. So it is already out there. So this is actually a more aggressive approach of trying to say, you have to take your environmental issues class for your continuing ed. we're popping this in.
I get that. I get that it's in the report, but a report can be like, oh God, I got to read that report. Whereas we break it down into neighborhoods and say, here's a sheet on this neighborhood, and it's coming from us, the town, as opposed to one big giant report. Anyway, it's just another layer. And I'm gonna go to Leah.
Thanks, Peter, and thank you, Shelley, for explaining all of that. So yeah, I can help develop the coastal resilience part of the class. I think from CRAC, what would be helpful is if you have any suggestions, and we can do this at a different meeting, also via email, of specific topics or parts that you think should be included. And then of course, once it's all made up, then I can distribute it to CRAC, and you can look it over and give suggestions. Shelley, I have a question for you. So as far as the fiduciary responsibility, so there's a lot of models out there for sea level rise and high tide flooding and all of that. And that's what they are. They're models. Like we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future and how soon it's going to happen. But if we give that information during the class, are they still obligated to tell their consumers about the potential projections if it's not like set in stone?
Right. What I would say to that, the quick answer to that is there's going to be a line where the risk on a property becomes a material fact, right? And when it be like the demonstration we just saw, the presentation we just saw, that sewer connection is imminently at risk. Nothing's really going to stop that risk. That's a material fact. That's what has to be disclosed. So that's how people are getting around mentioning the Arcadis report. And I agree with the presentation we just saw. It's very difficult to put an exact date on something, right? So we don't really know when the sea level rise, blah, blah, blah. I won't get into all that. My point being, once it's a material fact, it has to be disclosed. So we're seeing that there's 2 properties on the market right now, 6 Sheep Pond and 49 Red Barn. They can't even get a mortgage, right? They're so at risk. So because they can't get a mortgage, because they can't get flood insurance, sure, those agents are disclosing that because they have no choice, right? So that's a material fact. And this line, Leah, to your point, right? It's not going to be now you have to tell the consumer on some of them, right? Because they're not imminent. But what I kind of am hoping to do with this is create a change in the flow, right? So that the consumer starts to expect their real estate agent to tell them what the potential risks are versus not. That's really what, this whole issue is so complicated, and it's not going to be solved with any, oh, now everybody understands all the risks. Great. Yeah. So this is just another avenue or way to put good information in front of real estate agents who talk to homeowners. That's all. And so when it's a material fact, like Red Barn right now, or like Sheep Pond right now, that has to be disclosed. Some of these won't be, but then they will be, so that's the idea.
Yeah, I've actually had some potential homeowners contact me about those 2 properties. And so I send them, the erosion historic rates, the projected ones, the flood models and all of that. But I obviously don't offer any real estate advice. I just say, here are the models.
My advice to a client that reached out about that was it could last 10 minutes or 10 years. You decide what you're comfortable with, but it could be gone this winter, or you could get several years. But anyway, point being, we don't have to disclose information for information's sake. We have to disclose material facts.
Thanks, Shelley. Matt.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that Leah probably has a lot of this in presentations she's already made. And I think it should be somewhat simple, keep it at a fairly high level. And if they want more detail, they can do exactly what you're suggesting. They can call and say, can you give me more about Brant, like Brant Point and Matticat, those for sure have to be given as examples. But I think that, sort of more high level, we could make sure that they just contact people. I like to think that once this is out there, I think for the most part, the realtors want to do the right thing. And I think this will help create a environment where they all do it, and I think that this would help create because none of them want to be held responsible later, and no one wants this to turn into a mess. And I think they want to do the right thing for the clients, most of them. And so I think if this is presented as the way I think it's great the way you're suggesting to do it, because I think it presents it positively as, hey, we're dealing with it. Here's what we face. We as a community are dealing with it, but here's what, here's risks that you have to make sure your clients are aware of that may influence their decisions. And I think that is the right way to do it. It's fair. And, that's what builds trust and enables you to sell homes. And so I think that will, in the long run, I think this will, short term, there might be a couple of bumps, but in the long run, this is the right thing. And I think they'll all be on board. I don't believe there's a lot of people out there trying to snooker people. You don't last very long in this business if you're out snookering people. So
That's right.
anyway.
And I think
thank
I'll
you.
just stay in until like June. I won't go anywhere until it becomes popular, and then I'll go back out. So just
thank you,
to
Matt.
put it again small, like if, I would greatly appreciate your input. I think you guys know more than, almost any other, if not any other organization out there right now on these issues. I'm going to move forward with adding this to the class with with Isabel. I think you guys are my best resource to get accurate and timely information included. And again, I may come back to you down the road and say, it's been 2 years. Do you want to tweak this? Is there other information you'd like to switch out? But I see it as an ongoing thing. And I think, Matt, thank you for the belief in my profession. It's a tough place to be a real estate agent sometimes. Anyway, I think it will turn the tide eventually, and this will be expected from agents, from good agents. And I think the brokers are going to get on board because they don't want to get sued. So I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. We really appreciate you coming and attending the meeting and sticking your neck out. And I hope you got home and your house hasn't been egged or whatever. Okay.
The night is young. Maybe by the time this gets out on the town website, I'll be in a different situation, but thank you.
Okay, Christy.
Yeah, maybe just something more for Leah if she's going to contribute, and with all our help, I guess, is to not just put in the disclosures, but also put in the things that homeowners can do. Resolve. That component of it, so that it's not just one end of the story. That there is measures that you can do to have resolve. So that should be part of that that disclosure along with resolve. That's all.
Thanks, Christy. Okay, are there any members of the pub? All right, hold on. Leah, go ahead.
Sorry, Peter. So do we want to work on a one-page or informational, we'll try to make it one-page informational sheet to give out at the class, and
Yes.
potentially other real estate? Okay.
Are you giving us homework? Or do you want to, do you want to send us something that you're looking for by the next meeting?
I think what I'll do is I'll send an email out asking for specific information that you all would like to include on it, and then we can go from there.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, I'm not sure I think Leah and Vince have given this discussion multiple times. They know how long it takes. My guess is that they could do a half-hour, 45-minute presentation that covers the main points just from what they've already done. Leave 15 minutes for answers at the end, and that would be all that's necessary. I don't need to micromanage it myself, but I think that, I think that would be the easiest thing.
And thanks, Matt. I don't see it as micromanaging. I just think that, if it's given the committee members a chance to contribute something, and there might be something that Leah and Vincent didn't think of that could be included. That's all. Doesn't have to be tons of work for all of us. And you're all set, Shelley?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any members of the public that have anything to say on this issue? I'm looking at you, Deanne, and you, RJ, which are the only members of the public in attendance. Okay. We'll move on to number 6. This will be Leah. Discussion on what to include in the town's coastal resilience webpage.
Yep, I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, so can you guys all see the? All right, yeah, you can. So we've been talking about obviously updating the coastal resilience webpage so that it's more user friendly. Peter and I met with Florencia and Haley from the communications department, and what we can do is, so this is the engagement platform for the town. We can have a little, they call it a tile for coastal resiliency. And I'm just going to click on the transportation one to show you an example. So it has different tiles for each of the active projects. So we can include, all the CRP recommendations that are ongoing or underway here. And then each one has its own page. So what's really nice about this is that there's a nice timeline here. You can have important documents. You can also put in clips of videos. So if there's, say during one of the crack meetings, we're talking about something that's applicable, Florencia can take just that section out of the meeting and put it here. You can also add surveys in there and have people, leave comments about different things if there's questions and whatnot. So while we were developing the communication outreach plan, I think Sarah or Jen had suggested creating kind of like if there's another page that it can be linked to. So we can have it within this page. So kind of what I'm thinking is for coastal resilience and then having different tiles. So one that's sea level rise and giving more information about that. One that is projects that are underway, one that is, ground table water rise. But I wanted to open it up to you all for some more homework and a discussion about what the different tiles should be and what we should include in them. And I will stop sharing now. We can have a discussion.
Ben, go ahead.
Thanks, Pete. I like this, Leah. That looks like a really great way to organize information. And I think having tiles that tie back to some of our key topics like sea level rise, erosion, and the CRP. Would you also imagine having, or I don't know what the town would want to put up there, but some of those because you have that whole spreadsheet of all of the recommendations in the CRP and where all the progress is. I can imagine you would have that up there, but how would you select, I guess, some of the key projects where progress is actually, ongoing, I guess, like maybe the downtown flood barrier, like as that progresses, that would be one thing I would think is we'd want to figure out how to pull out, I guess, some of those key big projects so that people could explore them over time.
Yeah, I'll have to ask Florencia how to do that. I know for that project, we want to create a web page for it that has like, a story map. And so that could be one of the tiles that it kind of links to. And
Leah and I had discussed this prior, obviously, to the meeting, and it wouldn't just be the information on those tiles, but the tiles are sort of what Doug had talked about, doing a condensed brief on the various important aspects of the plan, so that people could get a quick hit. And that's what these tiles are, is a quick hit. This is the essential information you need to know on this. But of course, embedded in that with every link back to the tile will be a link to the plan, to the page in the plan where this is discussed. So if they want everything, they can get everything by going to that link. But this is a way we can draw people in. They can read it, very simple language, but then go to where the source is and read it. So these would sort of be like endnotes in a book, you know, it'd be the extra information. And then you want the whole thing, you can go right to the whole document. I think it's a great idea with every single post that goes out. If there's links to those tiles, people aren't just seeing here's oh great, another post in Instagram, and they move on to whatever TikTok thing they're looking at or whatever. Here is something concrete, and here is a link so that I can learn more about it. And not everyone's going to do it, but I think as we go forward with this outreach plan, we'll bring more and more people in, and it'll become a normal thing to wait for the post to look at more. And then, you know, we're not going to reach everybody, but hopefully we reach most of them. We have other comments? So I got a thumbs up from Doug. Everyone else think this is a good idea? Okay, Rachel.
Hi, thanks, Peter. I just wanted to add that I think one of the least discussed concepts of, which isn't really coastal resiliency per se, but I suppose I included in there, is groundwater and, you know, potential for rising groundwater. And when we start discussing things like Mariner Way and some of the Concom regulations, I just want to make sure that these are things that are included, because I think people don't know a lot about this. And I think it's something that is really important, particularly for homeowners on Nantucket to understand. Thank you.
Very much agree with you. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Okay, Deanne. Okay, RJ. Any comments? All right, we will move on. Review press release regarding cracked communication and outreach plan. You guys probably saw that in the packet, and this is also Leah.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. And want to open it up to any comments or suggestions for the press release, to delete anything, add anything, thoughts. If there's nothing, this will get sent to Florencia and Haley, and then they will disperse it to the news media outlets. Like, Doug?
Doug, do you have something?
Yeah, just a minor thing on the second line. You don't need a apostrophe after thing. It's not possessive. That's all.
Yeah, I think it looks great. I think it should go out as soon as we can get it out there. Do we all agree?
Right.
Yes. Okay. For our two members of the public, now one, do we have any comments from you guys? Okay, seeing none, you got your marching orders, Leah. Moving on to number 8, discussion on translating the coastal resilience plan. Go ahead, Leah.
So Peter and I had met with Florencia and Haley, asking them about potentially translating the CRP, and Florencia got a quote back from the company that they used to do the town warrant, or the special town warrant this fall, and it's about $17,000. So it's more than what they have in the communication budget. So we're going to explore different options how to get this hopefully funded, so that it's in at least Spanish, and then from there, hopefully different languages. But we figured we'll start with Spanish since all of our social media is also, translated into Spanish as well. But so I'm gonna see about the Article 10, and then if there's any, local or I'll start with local grants that may be able to fund it. But if anybody has any other ideas, I'd love to hear that.
Thank you, Leah. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that this is the town basically saying we can't afford to tell our Latino neighbors what's happening. And I know that there are some of them that speak our language, but a majority of them, who knows? And I think it's vital that this plan is in every language that's represented out here. And I don't think we should waste any time in getting it translated. This shouldn't be an issue. It should be that the plan is available to everybody. Anybody disagree with me? I'm fine with that. If you got something to say, I'll hear you. Go ahead, Leah.
Thanks, Peter. I don't think it's the town saying that we don't want to translate it into Spanish. It's just that it wasn't in their budget.
I know.
Generally, for budgets, you do it the year before. So, but I think that there's options where we can find money to be able to do it. And this would also be the first plan that is in Spanish that the town has. So that would be pretty cool too.
I guess I'll just rephrase that. I don't mean the town is specifically saying, no, we don't want this. It's just saying it's how people will perceive it or may perceive it. Anyway, go ahead, Matt.
Could we do do we have enough money to do the executive summary to start? See how many are picked up? Because we could translate this in. There's about 90 languages in the school now, Peter. We could translate it into 90 languages, but I'm not sure that very many of them are going to get utilized. Yeah. And so could we do executive summary? And if we're giving out hundreds of these, then do the whole thing. Or is there a way to use AI to feed a report in and have it come back translated? It wouldn't surprise me if you could actually do that in today's world and not spend 17,000, throw it through a computer.
I agree with all that. I just have to think about the environmental justice communities and how some grants are tied to us serving their needs. And if we're not letting them through our financial restrictions, if we're not providing a plan translated, that could trip us up. And of course, we just want everybody to be able to read the plan anyway. But yeah, I agree about ChatGPT AI. If there's a way we can figure that out. Does that sound feasible to you, Leah?
Yeah, I'll reach back out to Florencia and see if she can get a quote for just the executive summary and ask her about the AI translation.
Okay. I don't see any more hands. You got any questions, RJ? Okay. Okay. So number 9, we have this on the agenda every meeting going forward. Public outreach ideas and strategies from committee members. Does anyone have any ideas that you want to share on anything? It's sort of an open forum for all of us. Okay, you're not on the committee, Leah, but you can go ahead and say something.
Thanks, Peter. I just want to say that I forgot to post on Thanksgiving, so our schedule will just shift down a week. Sorry about that. And then also, I was speaking with, I can't think of her name right now, but anyway, she was saying that for both Instagram and Facebook, there's actually a translate button. So my question to you guys, and I know I had brought this up last meeting, but do we still want to keep the Spanish translation within our text, or do we want to just keep it English, and then if there's a Spanish speaker and it comes up, they can hit translate and it translates automatically to Spanish, so that we don't have, essentially 4 paragraphs of information in one post. Just wanted to get some feedback about that.
Speaking for myself, I think it'd be better if it was right there already translated, because if you have to hit translate, maybe you're not gonna. But if it's in Spanish, someone who sees it, who speaks Spanish and not English, will start reading it right away. I would think that'd be a better way to go. Jen, did you have your hand up?
I was just gonna say I'd double check the accuracy of the translation, particularly because it's topics that might not be common in the social media translators. That would be my hesitation for using the translation piece. I don't think it looks bad having the 2 paragraphs. You just have to kind of open and scroll down.
Okay, anyone else have any comments on this? We're a quiet bunch today. RJ, can that fish talk? Okay. All right, approval of the minutes from November 14th, 2023. I assume everybody's read them.
Peter, those
Great.
didn't get sent out, so that has to get to the next meeting.
Okay. All right.
If you guys can make a motion to move that to the next meeting.
So moved.
Okay. Okay, I'll take a second.
Second.
All right, thanks. Roll call vote. Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Doug Rose,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Christy Kickham,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman. Rachel Freeman?
Sorry, yeah, aye.
Okay, thank you. Chair votes aye. All right. New business, Committee and Natural Resources Department reports from Planning Board, Conservation Commission, Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, Select Board, Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers, and other committee members. Do we have any reports from you guys? Okay. Discussion of upcoming meeting dates. Next meeting is December 12th on Zoom. And I know the answer to this question, but after that, the next meeting is December 26th. I'm sure you all are going to be there for that, right? I didn't think so. I'll be in Minnesota myself. I have access, but I think we should, I don't know. What do you guys think? Speak.
Skip it.
No more thumbs up for this one. You got to verbalize it. Are we skipping it?
Skip it.
Skip it.
Doug?
Skip it. Motion to skip. Second.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Okay. Roll call vote. Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Doug Rose,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Christy Kickham,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, well, that's it. Nothing else to say, anyone? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
So
Second.
move from Matt.
Second.
Okay. Bunch of jokers. Okay, so, all right. Roll call vote. Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Doug Rose,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Christy Kickham,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
RJ Turcotte's Fish. Chair votes aye. See you guys over Stroll. Have a good weekend. See you in a
Thank
couple
you.
of weeks.